Hello and welcome back to another episode of Red Tinted Glasses. I'm back, and the Dons continue to be back, Phil, as another win is racked up, this time a hard-earned but fully deserved 1-0 victory over Dundee United. A huge game coming up on Wednesday night that we'll, of course, preview on the show, but the good times keep rolling.
No, it's good to have you back, and not 10 Shades of Red either. But yeah, no, it's feels weird, coming on and being positive for what is it now, the 10th week in a row, I think. Probably longer, including last season.
Yeah, exactly. As you say, including last season, I think the run's incredible. But yeah, no, not different shades of red, and a really cracking angle Premier Sports managed to get of me pre-match that really showed off some of the tan that I managed to get pre-match. So one change to our lineup tonight after, of course, yourself and Callum ably held the fort in my absence last week. But it was three changes to the Dons starting 11. Ante Palaversa coming into the starting lineup in place of Graham Shinnie. And after their impressive 45 minutes at Parkhead, both Esther Sokler and Duke earned their place. And I don't think anybody could have really argued with those changes. Maybe a bit of a surprise seeing Shinnie drop out.
Yeah, I was about to say, I think the me and Callum had sort of discussed that the team that started the second half was more than likely going to start against Dundee United. Obviously, Nisbet potentially picking up a knock, I think, not even making the bench. And like I said, I think the real surprise for me was it was Shinnie that was dropped over Nilsson. I thought he maybe needed the rest slightly more, but after seeing Vinny's Insta story of Nilsson cycling to and from training, maybe he is the fittest, and it shows why I'm not the trainer at the squad. But yeah, I think it was the team we all kind of expected to see out on Saturday.
And I think, with obviously the talk of Jim Goodwin returning and maybe how Dundee United might set up, I was maybe a bit surprised how they just camped themselves in their half for most of the game. I know obviously Callum's not with us tonight, but he drew a lot of similarities from the game at the weekend to Jim Goodwin's time in charge of Aberdeen at the game at Pittodrie against Celtic, where we camped inside our half for most of the game and ultimately Celtic found a winner. Apologies for that slight PTSD that I might have just given to some of you tuning in live or, of course, catching up later on. But I thought once again it was a very kind of positive start, but there was kind of shades of sloppiness, I guess, throughout that first half. Jamie McGrath, of course, having a standout week last week. Kind of nothing was coming off. I know a lot of people maybe drew comments on the fact that it was down to Dundee United sitting in Topi Keskinen. I know we were having the argument in our group chat. I thought was our best player in that first 45 minutes. Callum didn't necessarily agree. And as you said, it was not very hard to be a standout player in that first 45 minutes. It just wasn't we weren't at our fluid best, I guess.
Yeah, it was really tough. Like you say, I think Goodwin set up to try and get a point from minute one. Not only in the way that he sort of camped in Dundee at its own half, but the sort of even just the time wasting at every goal kick and every free kick. From about the 15th minute onwards, you could kind of tell that United were there just to grab the point. But yeah, like you say, a little bit of a frustrating first half. McGrath really struggled, I thought, again. Is it down to tiredness? No idea. He's been, relied on quite heavily to be the creative outlet at times. But I think, in a way, credit to Dundee United because the way they set up totally worked that first half. It forced us into, using the same phrase, forcing these long balls up, which weren't really sticking and we're playing right into United's hands. Duke and Tope weren't really getting much joy out wide, I thought. Again, I think it's just because there were so much players camped in that when they did get past a fullback, there was 3 or 4 bodies in the box. So it was really tough to pick somebody out. And again, I thought Topi was maybe a little bit greedy at times, but yeah, bit of a frustrating first half, but nothing in terms of causing problems for our backline, which I suppose was the positive to take from it. Dundee United, although having a few maybe chances to do something, didn't really have anything going for them up front.
And I think it's quite fitting that you mentioned there about Dundee United and the chances they created. We were saying at work today, I can't really remember Mitov having a serious save to make, but I suppose congratulations go to Dimitar Mitov making it into Chris Boyd's team of the week, despite Dundee United not having a single shot on target, which probably just shows you how much Chris Boyd was paying attention to the game of the weekend. But going back to your kind of point about Duke and Topi Keskinen, I felt they were chopping and changing the wings that they were on quite frequently in that first half. Topi going on to his favoured left side and then switching back to the right. There were, again, as I said, that little bit of fluidity. Graham Gibb commenting about we seem to be too quick getting the ball forward, too many long balls. Assume we were trying to get in behind them, but it wasn't working. I sometimes do wonder that with Esther Sokler, especially with his pace and height, there was a couple of occasions where Esther is anticipating a Dundee United defender not winning the ball, so they win it and the play breaks down. But what I did like about the way we set up with Topi, Duke and Esther as our front three effectively was we had those options to utilise one wing or the other, and we had a striker in behind that I'm not, maybe mobile's not the right word with the greatest of respect to Kevin Nisbet, but is a bit more of a busybody than Kevin Nisbet and was a bit of a nuisance to that Dundee United backline without scoring. So I think we gave United more to think about, but as you said, we were maybe a bit too greedy in possession at times when it got to the final third.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, I think Dundee United knew that our biggest threats were probably going to come down the wing in Topi and Duke, and I think that's where I think maybe the slight frustration with Topi maybe not getting his head up as much as he could have. As soon as he was on the ball, there were 2 or 3 Dundee defenders pulled towards him just to try and shut down that avenue. And there was one moment, I think, particularly in the first half, where I think he could have maybe just rolled the ball across the 18-yard box to Sockler, and he would have either had a shot at goal or could have even swung it one more over towards Duke at the back post. But yeah, like I say, I think that the main positive really was that there wasn't anything for us to worry about defensively. It would have been a different story if, Dundee United had really sort of shut in, we weren't getting much opportunities, and every time they got the ball back, they were hitting us on a counter and causing problems, but they didn't really have that threat, which, is potentially testament to our defence, but I think it's more than likely just the fact that they just had nobody that was committed to going forward, really.
And I suppose kind of going back to one of the points you made is, as a positive from our defensive side, Mitov not really having anything to do, maybe a slight frustration in that first half that Dundee United's keeper didn't really have many saves to make as well. It was all nice flicks, tricks, and a couple of balls fizzed certainly into the box. One really steps out. I think it was Nicky Devlin that really forced it across the 6-yard box. But yeah, no real kind of clear opportunity for the Dons in that first 45.
Yeah, I think, going back to the point that Gray made, I feel like a lot of the long balls we're trying to, make stick up top were really quite forced. As frustrating as I know it can be for us watching and, no doubt for the players on the pitch, just passing the ball around in front of Dundee's defence and not really having that clear-cut chance is probably what made them just go, right, we've got to try something to just get in behind here. But yeah, I think it was a little bit frustrating not to see the keeper worked a little bit more. But again, I think it all just comes back to the fact that Dundee were just camped so deep with so many bodies that it was really, really tough to try and work that chance. Again, maybe comes back to what we've discussed before, not really taking much on from outside of the box, constantly trying to work it into the box. But yeah, it was a little bit of I say lackluster, for better terms, first half.
I just wonder though, like especially for Jamie McGrath, I highlighted his performance in saying, a week's a long time in football in the sense that, he's being lauded for his performance at Parkhead and nothing was coming off in the first 45. I wasn't directly having a go at Jamie McGrath for that point of view. For me, it was just, as you said, because that creative spark comes through Jamie, when it wasn't coming off or the pass was slack or the Dundee United defender was just getting their foot to the ball, it felt like it was getting highlighted and it was getting frustrating. But we kept, as we said, swapping Topi and Duke on their wings. And, it wasn't just, we'll just keep doing it until hopefully it works. No, like we've seen plenty of times this season. a willingness to change it up during the game, and thankfully that proved fruitful later on. In that first half, I thought Topi looked good. He looked really threatening in off that left. John Kelo thinking that Keskinen will be a star on Wednesday as his pace will be seen full force. Given what we saw in the second half from Shayden Morris, would you still be starting Topi on Wednesday? He obviously came off with a knock. I assume that was the only reason, not tactical. I know we were kind of having that discussion amongst ourselves, but given what we saw in the second 45 from Shayden, does he deserve a start on Wednesday?
Well, I mean, personally, I think he does. For me, he was the difference maker in the game. But I think as well, where I was sort of having this discussion after the game was we sort of saw the impact that Duke had coming off the bench against Hearts. Having that sort of player that, has shown he can finish, he can create goals, he's got pace, he's quite a physical player as well. I think potentially having that element off the bench through Topi, especially if, perhaps Nisbet's still out with a knock, I think that could be quite valuable for us sort of in the second half, especially if, Morris and Duke are the two wingers to start and they're causing the fullbacks a lot of problems, tired legs, maybe a fullback on a book. And I think having Keskinen come on just to really hammer that home maybe for the last sort of, well, even at half time or the last sort of half hour, I think would be quite an asset for Jimmy off the bench.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other, I guess, kind of place where there was certainly the last time I was on the podcast discussion was around that centre midfield going to Parkhead and whether or not Ante Palaversa would start over Graham Shinney or Nielsen. He got the nod at the weekend, and I think this is quite an interesting point from Paul Hurd, because certainly again when we look as the game developed, I agree with Paul's comment where he says, so good to see Palaversa start, but soon noticed how much we were missing the bite and thrust of Graham Shinney. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think definitely. As much as, I think it was a game that would have really suited Palaversa. Like I said, I think we just had that sort of lack of final third, I don't want to say movement, but that sort of managing to get in behind. He had a lot of time on the ball and he made a lot of good passes. But I think he really did struggle when he was sort of getting the ball on the halfway line and going, right, where's the channel run that's got a gaping hole? And he would look and just see a flat back five and just go, right, okay. And, like we say, the game did become a little bit scrappy at times in that midfield with Dundee United, where Shinney maybe probably would have been a little bit more suited. And to be fair, I mean, I was calling for Palaversa to play at Parkhead and was, proved wrong for the most part. So I think, I'm going to go with Jimmy's sort of judgment and sort of see Nielsen and Shinney starting on Wednesday night.
Do you think, there was potentially one eye on the game on Wednesday with Graham Shinney not starting? We've got 3 games in a week. Do you think that potentially played a part?
Oh, I think definitely. Like I say, I think I was maybe expecting Nielsen a little bit more. We'd sort of maybe discussed a little bit of tiredness creeping into his game, where he sort of had a couple sloppy passes, perhaps. And again, it sort of is the same point as you make about Jamie and the fact that I think it's just because he's been so good that when the slightest thing doesn't come off, it looks you notice it a lot more than potentially other players. But no, I think you're exactly right. I think it is really to try and keep that midfield as fresh as possible, because again, it'll be a potentially long evening for them. They're going to have to do a lot of running, box to box. So definitely an eye ahead, I think.
Hopefully a lot dominating that midfield. Certainly there's one player in particular that I know a few people will be hoping has a very quiet game or certainly put in their place. In terms of obviously the game itself from the weekend, halftime 0-0 felt frustrating in the sense that we were being the only team in the ascendancy, and that very much continued in the second half, but obviously with the freshness of Shane Morris coming on and giving Dundee United all sorts of problems. For me, the biggest surprise was in the second half that Dundee United didn't kind of maybe try and win the game, so to speak. They basically, as you said, came here for a point, continued their time-wasting tactics. And I totally agree with Tom English. His assessment on Sports Sound at full time said it was a victory for attacking football, a real kind of justice that Aberdeen won that game, and that's why, I've titled the episode, it was a deserved victory. Yes, it was only 1-0, but it would have been an absolute travesty had that game finished 0-0, because it would have been a robbery from United taking anything away from Pittodrie at the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, like you say, frustrating going in at half-time 0-0, but, no concern at all, really. It felt like the goal, or goals that we were hoping for, was only going to come from one side, really. And like you say, no change from Dundee United in their sort of personnel or the way they were approaching the game. And I think that really kind of played into Morris's hands a little bit. Because I think he's at his best when he's got a defender retreating, which is basically all Dundee United did for 94 minutes, including stoppage time. So, he was just in his absolute element. Like I say, a difference maker. And, I think a lot of credit's got to be given to him for the work he must have done, in his time where he has been out with the squad and in pre-season when Jimmy came in. Because I thought, some of the final product he was producing, some of the crosses into the box were superb. I think maybe we could have anticipated a little bit more, because 9 times out of 10, Morris is going to the byline and swinging something in. I feel like there was a couple of balls where you're just thinking there just needs to be somebody there, and it's an easy tap in. But I thought he was superb when he came off the bench at halftime.
Yeah, it was funny listening to Willie Miller on the drive home when he said, that Shayden Morris is going to, step over, get to the byline, or cut back and whip the ball in, but because that's what he genuinely does. And he said, but Dundee United just didn't kind of click on to that and struggle to deal with him all game. And, it's really a stunning redemption arc for Shayden Morris. I was having a discussion with Keith at full time, and it was 256 days to the day on Saturday when he was hooked, inside half an hour against Motherwell in that, devastating first half, where when he trudged off that Pittodrie pitch, I think pretty much everybody in Pittodrie assumed that his Aberdeen career was finished. And I remember speaking to him at Player of the Year, and, he said, I'm not a right back, but if I'm asked to play, I'll get on the pitch and I'll do my best for this team. I just want to kind of be given the chance to show what I can do. And look, it's taken maybe an arm round the shoulder from Peter Leavin and Jimmy Thelin, but what a 45-minute cameo, and he comes away with man of the match. And, has got, as we said, people talking about whether or not he now starts this game on Wednesday.
Yeah, definitely. I think, as much as credit's got to be given to managers, I think a lot of credit's got to be given to him as well for his mentality. I think a lot of people, I'm not a high performance athlete, but, if I'd sort of had, even in like my own line of work, if I had some sort of, getting thrown under the bus by my own manager, I'd probably be thinking, God, I don't really want to go in tomorrow. If I could just, jack it now and just sort of coast under. But for him to come and, work on the areas of his game that needed work and sort of really come back and improve a point in a way, I think is testament to him as well. And yeah, I think it's really exciting. It's really nice as well when you hear him speaking about the club, because he does seem like he's really, really, as everyone seems to have, bought into what we're trying to do. And he seems to actually care as well about the fans, I remember speaking to him at the I think it was Aberdeenshire Cup final up at Balmoral when the young team were playing against Banks of Dee. And he was just a genuinely really, really nice lad and had time for all the kids that were wanting to go up and get photos and speak to him and all this. So yeah, really pleased for Shayden to have his sort of redemption somewhat completed here.
Yeah. And Martin Davidson wanting to give a shout out to the organisers of the pre-match display on Saturday. Again, we saw pre-match and throughout the game, the atmosphere that was built up, and I really kind of enjoyed as the teams were coming out. It was, you heard the Red Shed singing, "Come on, you Reds, come on." There's like different like kind of atmosphere to just the normal applause or singing "Stand Free." It really kind of, I don't know, for me, it just seemed like there was a bit more oomph about the crowd. And I know certainly the plans for Wednesday is back for another explosive, noisy and colourful display. Just think back to the last game where we saw that pyro. So I'm sure that will really add to the colour and the atmosphere of Wednesday's game as well. And good to see the club and Mez, of course, continuing to bring that atmosphere. And especially in games like Saturday, where the longer it goes on 0-0, we've seen in seasons gone by, the crowd gets frustrated. The crowd go, oh, it's not going to be our day. You look at Esther Stokler's chance, which we'll speak about as well. Once again, Saturday just didn't feel like that. It just felt like the crowd was willing the team on. And I don't know, for me, again, on Saturday, it only felt like there was going to be one winner, and it was going to be us.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like you say, I think the players, the management, everyone's spoken about how important the crowd have been in sort of, getting us over the line in these sticky games where it looks like a goal's not going to come. And I think that, like you say, it starts from the pre-match. Not even in the stadium. The whole city just feels buzzing just now. Obviously, I know you tend to go to games with your son, so maybe don't enjoy as much of a pre-match pint as you used to. But we were in the Butcher's Arms before the game, and everybody that was in there was going to Pittodrie. Went to the Scotia Bar after the game, and it was just jumping, and it was just such a feel-good factor about the city. It felt like everybody that you bumped into in town, oh yeah, going to Pittodrie later, oh, going here afterwards, and it was a clamour for tickets for Dundee United at home. It's just,
Yeah.
Is it the 1980s? Like, what is going on? Aberdeen top the league. There's folk that are looking for spare tickets for Dundee United at home. It's just, it's really, really good. And I think it's nice to see that everyone is sort of taking that pride in the club, pride in the city. And yeah, it's all down to, the sort of group of players and staff that we've got that have just wholeheartedly thrown themselves into it.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying on Premier Sports at the weekend when Connie McLaughlin asked me, was this the best Aberdeen team that I've seen? And the only team that I can kind of really feel comparing it to is obviously that League Cup winning team, and then into the next season under Derek McInnes. But as you say, that didn't go to a game this weekend with Rory, but I was in Pittodrie Bar pre-match. I mean, everyone knows how ridiculous it is to get a pint in Pittodrie Bar. I mean, even more so that they only had 4 members of staff on this weekend. I mean, I don't know what they were thinking, but even Pittodrie Bar was jumping pre-match. And as you say, where you were, and I've seen the videos of Scotia doing 10 men went to Mo pre-match, there's such a buy-in from the whole city. I know maybe a Saturday evening kickoff plays into it a little bit. We'll see what like on when Dundee come to town in a few weeks' time. But on the top of that, I seen on Craig Denham's Instagram, he kind of put up some of the stats. 25 points from the 27 availables, currently tied with season 1971-72 for the best start to a Dons League campaign in our history. 25 games unbeaten, it's the second longest run in our history. 18 league games unbeaten, third longest run in our history. 12 straight home wins, longest run in 50 plus years. It just adds on, winning breeds confidence, winning breeds momentum, but winning and this feel good brings people to Pittodrie. And obviously we've now gone and sold out Wednesday night as well. It's just, we seem to say it every week, going to Pittodrie, going to watch Aberdeen just now is not a chore. It's something we're all enjoying doing.
Yeah, and it's great, like you say, I mean, I've not had the privilege, much like yourself as well, not had the privilege to live through the peak glory days of Aberdeen Football Club. So, a feeling like this is just superb. And, I've spoken about this before, the amount of, young kids that are going to Pittodrie and seeing a really good Aberdeen team and getting the atmosphere, and it's just going to have them buying in so quickly and making all these memories. It's just, yeah, even just outside of the football club, like I say, just being an Aberdonian and being within the city just has this great feel about it just now. Even though I'm 100 miles away, but still. But yeah, everything's just it feels good to be an Aberdeen fan just now, and long may it continue.
And long may it continue, especially obviously, hopefully winning games, and that continues on Wednesday as well. But long may it continue having Jimmy Thelin here and being so positive. And David McLennan picking up a point, if we go back to speaking about football and not just getting excited about the direction of the club. David McLennan says, love that Jimmy doesn't hesitate in making substitutions. We seem to have depth and impact off the bench. didn't expect that at the start of the season. And David, for those that regularly watch these lives or see the comments, will know that David is a regular commenter on our squad depth and strength, or lack of it at times, last season. So to have David praising the depth and impact of our bench is definitely a sign of the improvements the club has come towards. But I think that was really key on Saturday as well, was how regularly we changed it. I think there's going to be a lot of fans here, and Calum's not here to claim that he said that Ambrose was scoring, but certainly when Peter Ambrose was warming up and stripping off to come on, must have been thinking, oh, for fuck's sake, what's he going to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said to you in our chat, there was a sort of point there where I was almost having to pinch myself when I was going, wow, 9 minutes, chasing a goal, and our front three, Shane Morris, Vinny Boussoud and Peter Ambrose. If you'd said this to me 6 months ago, I would have probably been in floods of tears. But I think it's testament again, I think, and really, I think this was where the game sort of changed, and we've spoken about this before. I think Jimmy made his changes very reactive to the situation, and really assessed what he was doing. Whereas I think Dundee United really fell apart because Jimmy Goodwin just had this really weird head loss and took off a centre half and a midfielder, and that just totally gave us everything that we needed in terms of being able to put that back line under way more pressure. And I don't quite get why he made that change. I'm happy that he did, but I think it really was a tale of reactive versus strange change.
And I also think the introduction of Graham Shinney also had a really positive impact into our midfield, and as we've kind of discussed, that pressing kind of really pushing us forward that extra yard. But what really impressed me was as well was how much we continued to stretch the United defence in terms of trying to find the right gap. And we've spoken about the balls that Shayden Morris fizzes across, and I think there was one instance not long after we took off Esther Sokler where I was like, that's where Esther would have been. It would have been a tap in for him. But on Esther Sokler, he must be thinking, how the hell did he not score? It's one of the most impressive saves I've seen. So much so that I think Dundee United were on a counter-attack and half the ground were still celebrating us being 1-0 up.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, I feel so heart sorry for him. I mean, going back to the Hearts game as well, 2 headers he probably should have had in the net. That one should have definitely been in the net with some save from the United keeper. I felt even worse for him because he was half wheeling towards the corner flag before he even realised. But yeah, I think maybe he's just an away from home in Hampden merchant, and if that's the case, I'm fine with that. If he wants to pop up again on the 2nd of November.
Yeah, I know. Honestly, I did feel so sorry for him. I also wondered as well, was the ball close to being fully over the line? But I don't think it ever was. And yeah, just fair play to Walton in goals for that save, because I'm sure about 5 minutes earlier there was a daisy cut from, I think it was Jamie McGrath, that he spilled just round the post, and I thought, how's he gone from doing that to pulling off that worldie? But I think again, credit also has to go to Aberdeen in the sense that we didn't let our heads drop off the back of that chance. We picked ourselves up and we went again. And when you look at the winner, it's Nicky Devlin that's in there knocking the ball back to Peter Ambrose. And look, Peter Ambrose hasn't played a minute of football after, well, I mean, we were speaking about chucking him out on loan after his appearance against Dundee, but that's why we sit on here yabbering shite and Jimmy Thelin gets paid the big bucks to make the decisions, because, hey, look, it paid off.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think, like you say, it's really kind of hallmark Nicky Devlin. I mean, how much times did we see him doing it for Livy? Last few minutes of a game, he's somehow, some way in the 6-yard box, and either on the end of a cross to put it in the net, or cutting one back across to at the time maybe someone like Scott Pittman perhaps. But yeah, so again, much like Sockler at Celtic Park, I'm chuffed for Ambrose. He just seems like the most wholesome fella you could come across. I don't know if anyone's sort of seen the post-match interview on Premier Sports with Morris and Ambrose. It just felt, the man's smile has probably never left his face for the entirety of the time between Saturday and now. But yeah, right man, right place. And, for someone that's not really had much chances. Maybe had a poor performance here and there. He could have milestone it on low form and low confidence. So I'm glad that he just kept it low and got it in. But yeah, chuffed when it got a goal.
Yeah, chuffed for him, and as you said, that interview was oh so wholesome just watching him. I don't know maybe how much he understood of what Connie was asking him, but he just stood there with the most beaming smile, just happy as Larry. And those of a Brock persuasion will maybe think he's been watching Fig with his goal celebration that he whacked out, putting us 1-0 up. But in terms of celebrations, as Sam Gordon says, Mitov's celebration was chef's kiss. I know I was speaking to Neve at work today, and she said she actually decided just to watch Mitov celebrating rather than celebrate the goal because it was just class. He just absolutely loves it, and at least I'm sure that kept him warm, running up and down, celebrating that goal. But another thing that Sam's mentioned as well, and I think quite relevant, again, it's another late goal for Jimmy Thelин's Aberdeen. He says the difference for him is JT has created a team that can literally score at any time, regardless of how the game is going. First or 90th minute, we can bag a goal, and I really feel that Saturday's game was reflective of that point from Sam.
Yeah, no, I think we were discussing this in one of the chats I'm in about sort of points won off of Jimmy's substitutions, just off the top of my head. Tope against Queen's Park, Palaversa against Hearts, now Peter against Dundee United. His changes all have an impact, and like you say, it's really just making us a team that can. And again, like I said earlier, I felt like there was only going to be one team that was going to score. There was no sort of nerve or worry. You just kind of had this feeling that Aberdeen were going to get the goal. And again, that's weird because if we'd gone in at 0-0 at halftime against Dundee United last season, you'd be kind of starting to sweat a little bit and go, there's no one that's really going to produce, or we're going to get caught on a horrific counter here and lose it ourselves.
Yeah, and one final thing from the game of the weekend, Paul Donaldson picking up about Vinny's shot near the end that went, certainly from where I was, looked very close to kind of nicking the post at least. He looked set to take the penalty when Peter Ambrose was fouled. No questions that it was a penalty, unfortunately. It looks that it was Peter's arm that was offside, where he kind of points for where he wants the ball to be played through from Shayden Morris. I would have loved that to just been given and seen what shithouse celebration Vinny Bizaouin came up with if he bagged that penalty. And I think I've seen a couple of people saying that he ran over towards the dugouts at a full time, I think, although Duke stopped him going any further. But of course, those on social media will have seen quite the iconic photo from the main stand of that old Manny giving Jim Goodwin the V's, I think, towards full time.
Yeah, I think Vinny probably wishes he would have been in the same boat. He seems like the kind of man that wouldn't forget anything that might have occurred. And like you say, coming to mind is the sort of Suarez dive in front of David Moyes, perhaps. So yeah, I mean, like you say, his effort for that worldie from where I am in the south stand looked like it was destined for the top corner. Like I said, I don't know what it would have looked like from the red shed and being right behind it, but yeah, I was willing him to score, like you say, just to be a big shit house if possible.
And again, Vinny, much like Peter, players that haven't seen much minutes over recent weeks, but coming on and being vital parts of the squad. I'll get that out eventually. And I think, again, listening to Shayden Morris in his post-match comments on Premier Sports, when he said, the managers always said, if you're not starting a game, you'll be involved, be ready. And we're seeing that when the players are coming off the bench. You were speaking about, substitutes that have won us points. Look at Esther Sokler at Parkhead as well. So again, we're seeing players ready to make an impact because they know if they get given the chance, that might then benefit them when it comes up to the next game, which of course in our case is Wednesday night under the lights against Rangers, Phil. Now, one comment that's come in from Can't Be Bothered is how refreshing is it to have a manager that will have a go at the Ugly Sisters? We saw, obviously, things not exactly going our way at Parkhead. We come back to claim a well-deserved 2-2 draw based on that second-half performance. Going into the game on Wednesday night, Phil, we're flying. Rangers picked up a nervy 2-1 win over St Mirren. Some controversial decisions. Who would be surprised that shrouds a Rangers game? What would be your expectation? I know I posed a question to you and Callum on the back of the last episode that would 4 points out of 6 be seen as acceptable coming into this home game doubleheader? I almost kind of wish I never asked that, because it feels like we should be going out and getting the 3 points based on form and possibly expectation as well.
Yeah, I think, so like you say, I think Rangers have sort of stumbled their way through to third place with a little helping hand from the typical suspects. But yeah, I think really it sort of goes back to sort of no fear, no respect. And also the fact that, in my opinion, we've been playing far better football. It seems like there's a lot of unrest within Rangers Football Club at the moment, between the fans and the board and the players. They'll maybe have their bed sheets out again to convey some message. And like I said, I thought it was interesting that Clement bowed to fan pressure and dropped Tavernier for the St Mirren game. So I think it'll be a really interesting game of football. Like I said, I think we need to really get them quickly and really put them under that pressure, because they seem to really not cope well under any sort of pressure. But yeah, like I say, I think it's weird. I don't think anyone, once the game's been and gone, depending how it goes, I don't think anyone would really be gutted with a point. It keeps the wheels going. It keeps us where we are in terms of 6 points ahead of them. But yeah, it almost feels like it should be 6 out of these 2 games. It just feels like it should be.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, Rangers will be getting excited for their cup final. Probably the only game they put an effort in, because, well, they don't raise their game for Celtic. They always raise their game when they come up against us. So this will be a real opportunity for them to try and put a marker down. I know we were discussing in our chat today that it'd be absolutely horrendous if it was Rangers that ended the unbeaten run. But on the flip side, David McLennan saying it's a real opportunity to make a statement on Wednesday. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. It's a statement for us to put down, not only to our opposition, put a marker down to Celtic, and put a marker down to Scottish football as a whole. And that's kind of a real opportunity. You mentioned Clement there and his tactics around James Tavernier. He threw Jack Butland under the bus after the defeat against Kilmarnock, and I saw he was very quick to come out and comment on Aberdeen, in the sense that the pressure was on us. He is a manager under pressure, and he is looking at any opportunity to do the mind games that I'm sure will throw the pressure on. I'm just glad that we've got a cool, calm, collected manager in Jimmy Thelin, who will bat away any ridiculous question around this game.
Yeah, I was about to say, it was almost a slip to a Jim Goodwin there. There would have been no calm or composure under him, I'll tell you that. But yeah, no, like I say, I think it really will sort of show how important Jimmy is in this mindset of the team. Like I say, having that sort of cool, calm, collected, and always very humble presence on the sideline, I think really does kind of help everybody stay in tow a little bit and focus on the job at hand. But yeah, I think it'll be a real game where I think we can get people to start taking us a little bit more seriously, because I still feel like there's big swathes that are just, waiting for some miraculous drop off, or almost feel like, as I've seen on Twitter, we're not a good football team. We're just better at winning games than everybody else. So, maybe we'll be taken seriously. Should we pick up the 3 points on Wednesday?
Yeah, no, imagine being good at winning games when you're not playing well. It's a sign of a really good team. Kaiser's saying that he'd be more confident if the game was at Ibrox compared to Pittodrie. David McLennan also thinking that Rangers will be under pressure to go for it, and that should suit our fast transitions. I'm actually probably more confident that the game is at a sold-out Pittodrie, have the home advantage. We've seen how rocking Pittodrie's been this season. The other one I wanted to ask you on was, how do you feel the fact that Rangers managed to eke out that 3 points at the weekend? I was having this discussion with Keith yesterday that had that game ended in a draw, it maybe wouldn't have suited us, because, again, the musical box speaking about if we beat them on Wednesday, it could be curtains for Clement. I thought if they didn't pick up that victory over St Mirren on Sunday, there would be a lot of pressure on Clement's shoulders and an expectation for Rangers to win. That media talk's maybe not going to be there. And then maybe that kind of eases the pressure on us as well, because obviously John Beaton's been appointed as referee, Don Robertson's on VAR, so us as without that tinfoil hat on, we can start our conspiracies around that as well. The media will come out with their stories, I'm sure, as well. So do you think the weekend win helps us slightly?
I think in a way, because I think what kind of bodes well is the fact that they didn't really win that game on the class of their football. They were really gifted it, A certain lifelong Aberdeen fan should probably have been sent off. St Mirren also should have had a penalty. So, it's not like they went and blew St Mirren out the water and, really just are coming into this game on a boatload of confidence. They've eked through by the skin of their teeth, really. Clement's still under pressure. The squad still doesn't look that great. And like I said, I think coming to a sold out Pittodrie where you're going to have, 4 stands on your back should really play into our hands. Like I say, I think just really getting it in quick off the bat, I think, is the main thing. But yeah, I'm glad that they're not coming into this off a loss and really, really up for it.
Yeah, and I guess that that expectation. Sometimes we speak about that going into playing Celtic once they've lost. Like I felt sorry for Ross County after having to face them after Dortmund for say. If we look at Aberdeen, Lewis Lorimer poses a question. We spoke earlier about starting Morris against Rangers. He says, how about Topi on the left, Morris on the right, and keeping Duke on the bench and using Duke as an impact sub? Would you be up for that as a possibility?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think the good thing about Duke as well is he's also got that potential to play through the middle if needed. So it does kind of give us that versatility there as well. Yeah, like I said, I think having one of Duke or Topi as a sort of impact sub would suit the game a little bit more, in my opinion. Again, it could be the sort of same thing as Dundee United, where you are looking at a 0-0 and the game's dragging on a little bit, and you're needing that sort of pace and impact off the bench. So yeah, I would not be opposed to that at all.
And I think you just mentioned there, if the game's 0-0 and dragging on, the pressure is definitely going to be more on Rangers to go out and claim the 3 points because of the expectation and pressure that is being put on them by the media, and as you've already alluded to, the fan base with their bed sheets. That, again, I think I've seen a few comments coming in on the live tonight. That could equally play into our hands because we've seen how quick we are in the transition. If we have the likes of Duke coming off the bench, Vinny coming off the bench, even Duke, who, as you say, played through the middle when Esther went off at the weekend. We've got players that can hurt this Rangers side on the counter-attack. So do you think, because I think it was Kaiser himself that put in a question saying we should look to hit Rangers or play on the counter on Wednesday. Don't necessarily agree with that. I would like to see us on the front foot and try to dominate the game, but can you understand that point of view?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think, like I said, I'd like to see us get in their face a little bit and try and take the game to them a little bit more than we maybe have in previous years. But at the same time, if Rangers have the ball in the midfield and they're just passing it sideways and backwards, I don't really, they're not posing much of a threat. And I think that's also where Jimmy really does want to try and win the ball back. We saw it a lot against Celtic, try to win it back in that sort of middle portion of the pitch and hit them quickly. But yeah, no, like you say, I think this is a good thing as well. We've got a lot of versatility in this squad. We can play a game of football where we can have really tidy midfielders on that are great at holding the ball. We can play with pace up front where we can really just hit teams on the counter, and we can play with a really nice balance of the two, like we sort of saw in the second half against Hearts. So yeah, definitely. It's coming back to this sort of trip to Parkhead feeling, but it's like you're not sort of thinking, oh, here we go again. This could be a pretty miserable evening of football. I think everyone's kind of quite up for it, and I think you can sort of tell that from what some of the players are looking to get out of Wednesday night.
Yeah, and I think, as you said, that the players are up for it from what we've seen, and the fans are most certainly up for it, and that's exciting. And there's a confidence going into these games. You're absolutely right. That's maybe not been there in previous seasons. In terms of the midfield battle, which is definitely going to be one that we're eagerly anticipating, I'm sure there'll be a warm welcome for the Rangers number 8 on Wednesday night. I hope his eardrums are going to be well sore come full time. I'm sure a lot of people are probably wishing that there's other parts sore come full time. Ante Palaversa started at the weekend. Do you expect him to drop out in place of Graham Shinnie? We've not even talked about the brilliant no-look pass that we saw from him from that free kick on Saturday against Dundee United.
Yeah, no, personally, I think it'll be Shinnie, Nielsen and McGrath, I think, is that sort of triangle in the middle. I can't see us going to a sort of flat 3 or any other variant. We didn't really do it at Celtic Park, so I can't really see us doing it now. But yeah, I think having that bite of Nielsen and Shinnie, sort of holding, and also the leadership that they can bring to that game as well. And then Palaverse off the bench as the game gets a little bit more stretched, and we potentially are looking to have that quality on the ball. Although his delivery did leave a little bit to be desired on Saturday. But having that sort of tidy, neat midfielder on the ball with about half an hour to go would be probably where I would go, in my opinion.
And I think, that, again, the positivity and the excitement for this game is also aided by the fact that we're largely going into this game with a fully fit squad. Dante Polvara is getting close to a return now. The only kind of maybe concern, Sam Gordon, I've seen someone else mention it as well earlier in the episode, was Leighton Clarkson fell awkwardly on his shoulder and looked to be holding it. I did have to wonder if he was going to last the game. And I thought, oh, Christ, we've just made that change. So, again, maybe wouldn't be too surprised to see him continue on the bench and be used as a sub if needed. But we're sitting here speaking about kind of options, and maybe a few people haven't spoken about this one. Would it be Rubezic? Obviously, for those that follow the Dons on social media will have seen he was out training today. I know there was maybe a couple of calls around uncertainty about concussion protocol because of that knock he took at full time, having to get stitches into his gum. I'm sure that was really pleasant. But I'm sure he's going to carry on and he'll line up if he had to have a bandage and take to the pitch for Wednesday.
Yeah, this is the exact type of game that Ruby would not miss for the world. This is the sort of game that I think he just is up for. A rock and Pataudry, where the first big hit he puts in will probably be celebrated like a goal. And I think it's the exact environment he thrives in. Maybe we spoke a little bit about some defensive mistakes from the pairing at Parkhead, but all in all, a really, really quality defender to have both on the ball and just his physical presence as well.
And I think, Kaiser posing a question, can anybody name a Rangers player that would improve our squad? Again, interesting to kind of listen to Sportscene. They were briefly discussing it, and this is actually going to form part of their pre-match build-up to the game, where they said right now there's probably not a Rangers player that gets into a combined Aberdeen Rangers 11 because of how well we're playing and how shoddily they are just now. And again, I think that speaks volumes for where we've been to where we are right now.
I don't even think that comes down to quality, though. I think that just genuinely comes down to mentality. At times Rangers look like a team of individuals, and there's not one point this season where it hasn't looked like a United from Aberdeen. And I think that's, one of those things that I really love about this squad is every player is maybe not the greatest technical player in the world, or, maybe leaves a little bit to be desired, but their heart is way bigger than teams in bygone years. When you look around the league as well, just their pure desire and passion. I think that could really be the tipping point for Wednesday night. It's the team that wants it most will, I think, come out and get the win.
But I also think it's also the togetherness of this squad. A lot has been made previously by people claiming wildly that Vinny has an attitude problem, but we're seeing him be very much part of the squad this season. Angus MacDonald, he's not featured a lot this season as well, yet he's there at full-time cuddling Peter Ambrose and, delighted for him, even though he's not playing, seems to really be integrated into that kind of squad player and keep the morale in the team high. And again, goes back to that point I made earlier from Shayden Morris saying, even though players aren't getting minutes, they know they have to be ready because if the chance comes, they need to come on and maintain the standards that are being applied by those starting. And again, yes, who wants it more in a game? Aberdeen Rangers, both teams are going to want it just as much as each other. But I think belief, mentality, you're absolutely right, and confidence are three key factors to this game. And right now, I feel we're thriving in those three. Yes, Rangers do have players that could potentially hurt us. I know a lot of people are commenting on Cherney right now because he scored a couple of goals, but a couple of times when I've seen him, he's not looked the best. So it depends what Cherney turns up. But people have only kind of identified one Rangers player as a potential threat. I think right now, if Rangers podcasts were speaking about Aberdeen, they'd probably be naming 2 or 3 Aberdeen players as threats. So I think that's where hopefully proves to be an advantage for us. But it's, again, like you said, it's just so encouraging and refreshing for us to be speaking about going into a game against one half of the Glasgow 2 in a positive manner and not being fearful of what the 90 minutes has in store.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I say, no fear, no respect. Heed first. That's, I think, what the entire stadium's going to be wanting.
Heed first into Wednesday. I think that's a perfect place to leave it and a perfect place to end it on. Phil, thank you very much once again, and thank you very much to those of you that have joined us here on the live on YouTube. Remember, if you are watching, like the video, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and follow us on your audio platforms as well if you've been listening into this episode as well. God, the excitement's building. Let's hope that continues on Wednesday night. We'll be back on Thursday reviewing all the action ahead of the Cup semi-final as well. A big week, big games. Keep tuned in.